Charles Darwin is famous for many things, but one of the things he's not famous for is being a romantic. He's famous for his discoveries in science. He filled hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of notebooks. He studied earthworms for 28 years till the end of his life and categorized flora and fauna and really changed the way we think about the world. The one thing he couldn't do was figure out whether to take a wife or not. And so he made a list of pros of having a wife and cons of having a wife, maybe as you did 40 years ago. And Darwin couldn't decide because the columns were pretty equal. The pros were he would have someone for company and to help him around the house. They did more help back then than we do today as wives. The cons were this was a man who traveled all around the world, and the wife might not want to travel, and the wife might not like him working all the time. Russ Roberts, who's author of a new book called Wild Problems, imagines himself sitting with Darwin and having this discussion, and he imagines Darwin kind of weighing the pros and the cons, and he imagines explaining to Darwin, who ultimately does decide to take a wife, that what Darwin has is not something that can be listed with pros and cons, but it's something known as a wild problem. What you ate for dinner tonight, what you chose from the menu or what you took out of the freezer is not a wild problem. It's a choice. But making the decision to marry 40 years ago or a few months from now, or having a bat mitzvah or even having a child, or joining and participating in Jewish life, or where to go to college, or even if to go to college, and what to do with your life and figuring things out, these are wild problems. These are things that have to be figured out over time, and they can't be decided in one moment. And often they're neither all good or all bad. At points in his life, probably there were things from the con list that showed up with Darwin's marriage, but there are probably many things from the pro as well. Because when you have a wild problem, it's not just 1 + 1 = 2. It's more complicated and more complex. The best way that it can be explained is imagine your teacher asks you to take a huge boulder and carry it up the stairs. So there's different ways you could do this, but what the teacher tells you is if you smash the boulder into tiny pieces and carry them piece by piece, ultimately you can carry it. And that's the nature of wild problems, that they're not beautifully solved. Sometimes you make a mess and sometimes they're smashing, but the benefit and the value far outweigh the problems. I'm sure that your daughter never gave you any problems, but other parents who may have had, she's literally president of her school. I'm sure she gives very few problems. She got all straight A's. I saw this on Facebook, and her bat mitzvahs tomorrow. But there's moments with our kids where we're like, ay vey, like what are they doing to me? How do they know to push my buttons? Or like Adele, right? This is baby Adele here? Right. But she's adorable. She pushed no buttons today. And these are things that, like, there might be a moment where you're like, oh, this is difficult and hard, but ultimately the payout is worth it. So this moment in Torah that we stop and go back to for Sukkot is Moses' wild problem. And it's appropriate because Sukkot is a kind of wild holiday. The Bima never looks this wild, crazy way except this week. Because Sukkot is kind of a wild holiday. Things are just growing everywhere, and we're talking about it. So what is Moses' wild problem? He reluctantly agreed to lead the Jewish people way back at the beginning of Exodus. He didn't want to do it. He refused God 5 times, but finally he did it. He, with God's help, got them from slavery to freedom. He goes away for 40 days to get the 10 Commandments, and what do while he's away? They build the golden calf. And if Moses was to make a list at that moment of the pros and cons of leading the Jewish people, the cons would be this long and the pros would be empty because he is frustrated. And we come to Moses at this moment in Torah in Exodus 33, where Moses is just having this wild problem where, like, he wants to make a decision, like, not to go on. He does not want to lead this people unless God gives him something. God has a problem too, because God not only has his leader Moses wanting to give up leadership of the Jewish people, God has these people that he moved from slavery to freedom. You want to hold this? Has these people that he's moved from slavery to freedom. There goes the Devar Torah too. So that's okay. She's so much more adorable than anything that I could say out of my mouth. And it's such nachis that this is what 40 years of marriage is about. Like, she's a big con. A big pro. The whole pro list is Adele. I didn't mean to say con. That was Freudian. The Devar Torah is a con. Adele is the pro. Anyway, so where was I? So Moses is like done. God is frustrated because it's people that he rescued and moved from slavery to freedom, just built a golden calf. Like, it's a wild problem for everybody. And what happens in this moment is really beautiful because they work together. And that's like a marriage or like parenting or having friends or having any kind of relationship or dealing with anything big that's in the world. It's not like black and white. It's not over in a day. It's complicated. I see the people that I close my mortgage with, like over here, like they know, like you don't come to Diane on like the first day and you're like, I'm done with this. She's at the end of the process, and there's been a whole of process before it. Like anything big, there's a lot of nuances in black and white. We break those rocks apart. But if we are doing the right thing, even if the pro and the con lists were equal at one time, wild problems aren't just about pro and con lists. They're about moving our heart. Think about how much love you felt under that chuppah 40 years ago, or you feel under that chuppah in May, or how much nachas you felt when your daughter was born, or when your child got into college that they wanted, or anything like that. There's more than a list of pros and cons. And that's exactly what we witness here at this Torah portion about Sukkot. It's not about Sukkot, but we read during Sukkot where like Moses is like, God, you got to show me. I got to see you. And God's like, well, you can't totally see me, but I'll show you my back. And so, like, God has weighed the pros and cons and says, I better show Moses something of me because he's going to leave. And Moses is like, if God doesn't show me something, I'm out of here. And so they synthesize and they figure out this way to see God. And then Moses, there's no pro and con in this moment, but Moses all of a sudden bursts out, and Jake will sing it in a little bit when we get to it in Torah, this gorgeous piece of liturgy, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Adonai. It's the most like gut-wrenching, beautiful thing that he's ever witnessed. It's probably like what was in your heart when your daughter was born, or when you stood up the chuppah, or when you got engaged. Like, it's just so moving to your heart. And that's a wild problem. And wild problems are often resolved by beautiful moments like this. And Sukkot, which is really this wild holiday, like we've been very prim and proper with Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and all of a sudden there's vegetables on the bima and we're living outside and dwelling. It's a reminder that it's not always about the prim and proper. Sometimes life is messy. Sometimes we need to break boulders apart. But ultimately, it's worth it for the moment like Moses has in this Torah portion that he sees God.